Liv, welcome back to the podcast. It's wonderful to have you here to talk about Lavender House.
Thank you so much. I am thrilled to be back, and I am so excited to talk about this book with you.
This book is so incredibly amazing. I gave my review to it just before the interview segment here. I'd love for you to tell folks how you describe this book.
Well, first of all, thank you. Thank you. The book isn't even out yet while we're recording this, so hearing people like it is it builds you up for that big day. But so what is it about? Actually, Hank Philippi Ryan, who is a brilliant author herself and a friend, she would offhandedly describe this in like a mystery chat as Chandler meets Christie meets La Cage aux Folles. And I was like, oh, that's it. That's the perfect description. So I can't top that. And that was Hank's. But if you want a longer description, I would say that, it's a 1950s mystery. It's 1952. Vander Mills is sitting in a bar thinking about drinking himself to death because he was an inspector for the San Francisco Police Department who just got caught in a raid on a gay club and immediately fired. So he's thinking about suicide. He's thinking about ending it all when a woman sits down next to him at the bar and says, I know who you are. I know why you were fired, and I want you to solve the murder of my wife. And with nothing left to lose, he goes with her to the titular Lavender House, which is a manor outside the city that is home to the Lamontagne family, which is the family that owns Lamontagne soap. And even though Irene, now deceased, and her wife, Pearl, who just hired Andy, in public were mistress and secretary, and their son is also queer, they know that with soap in the 50s, appearances are important. And so they found their gay son a lesbian wife, a lavender marriage. And so it was, until she died, Irene, and then still remaining is Pearl, the widow, their son, Henry, his boyfriend, Cliff, Henry's wife, Margot, Margot's girlfriend who comes in and out, Elsie, and Margot's mother, Alice, as well as the staff, all of whom are queer. Alice is the only straight one in the whole house. And, they have this gilded cage where inside they can be as free as they want, and outside they have to perform their roles of heteronormativity. But now someone is dead, maybe murdered by someone else in the cage, and they're all trapped inside. That's how I've been describing it.
In some ways, it's like one big game of Clue, a little bit. Because,
I love that comparison.
So many people jammed in the house, although we do get outside the house during the run of the book. So we're not all like jammed in there. And then it also has, from page one, this feel. You've just imbibed it with like this noir feel. Like I felt like I was like watching like Mildred Pierce or Imitation of Life or something like that, because you set the scenes so well. How much research went into creating San Francisco of the 50s, queer life in the 50s, and just the feel of that kind of film too? I mean, to be honest, it's very cinematic too.
Well, thank you. Thank you. I so appreciate you calling it noir, because that's exactly what I was going for. I was raised on a lot of those old Bogart and Bacall movies, and like that was so much of the inspiration there. And I've read all of Chandler's works. He's sort of a, writing sort of stylistic hero to me. And so being able to step into all that came sort of naturally, in terms of I've been studying the genre my whole life in some way. As for the actual historical research, that was a lot more complicated. And I would not be shocked at all if I get a bunch of angry emails from people who were in San Francisco in the 50s being like, no, not correct, not like that. I'm fully expecting those. You should feel free to tell me I got some detail wrong here or there. But a lot of the research was from Wide Open Town, which is a history of queer San Francisco to 1965 by Nan Alamilla Boyd, and I really hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. And, it's a book that came out a while ago, and I think almost 20 years ago at this point. And it is just so comprehensive. It gave me everything I needed to know about the queer community in the 60s. I've read it all through twice and forgotten it. There's so much in here, you forget it all. immediately afterwards. So every time I go through it, I like find new things and I'm like, oh God, did I do that right? Do I need to fix this? Is this the best way it could be? Maybe I should put this in. It's like inspiring every single time, and it's really exciting. This was like a big part of the research. I also, I'd gone since it was during COVID, so I couldn't really travel when I was writing this. I went through the online archives at the San Francisco Public Library, looked at old photos. There are a bunch of photo books of old San Francisco. I went to a lot of Facebook groups for San Francisco old timers who basically are like, I remember when this, and like picked up details that way. But yeah, so that was a lot of reading and just poking around essentially.
I love how much you got to do there. And I can only imagine if you'd been able to come to San Francisco as you wrote it,
Mm-hmm.
how much more you could have even dug into it and maybe even traveled up 101 to figure out this is where we're going to go off right here to the house. This is where the house is.
I mean, I think where the house is technically a national park. So there would never have been a house there. But I mean, maybe, I don't know. But, I looked at old photos of the one town they go to that's just outside San Francisco too. And oh my God, like I found one photo of it that was just so pretty with these signs down to the church at the end of the street. And I was like, this scene I can describe. I can describe the city, this small city, as this photo, and I will feel like it is honest and I will feel like it is what I want it to be. Mm-hmm. I've been reading, have you read the David Brandstetter mysteries that were just re-released?
No, not yet.
Oh,
they're on my list as part of the re-release. Yeah.
No, they're so good. And the first one is Fade Out. And they are a queer detective, not San Francisco. I think it's more LA based. The first one's 1969, so it's the 70s, and it's a noir and it's a gay detective. So it's very similar in that sense. I didn't start reading them obviously till after I had written Lavender House because they only were just recently re-released, but they are like reading them feels like maybe I'm sort of occupying a similar space just 20 years earlier.
Where did the idea for this come from? I mean, both like the plot itself and everything that you've got going on with the mystery and everything, but then also this ginormous cast of characters, because I don't know if people were counting, but there's a lot of people in play living in the house.
I mean, I think a good mystery needs a cast, a large cast. But yeah, so it came from a lot of places, the idea. I mean, the story I like to tell is I was watching one recent adaptation of an Agatha Christie book, I think Ordeal by Innocence, the Amazon one, where it's like kind of over the top and the house is 80% staircase and like everyone's just constantly whispering. And I loved it. And it was like, I love a campy sort of over the top Agatha Christie adaptation. And that still, goes all in on the visuals. It's a beautiful miniseries too. And I remember watching it and being like, these people, they like, it always feels like at least one of them has to be boring. I bet if they were all gay, none of them would be boring. And so that was definitely a large part of it was, and that's why I think even though I'm coming to it as sort of a noir writer, it ended up in this very Christie space for this first book. And I think that was one of the big sort of moments where I'm like, yeah, I'm going to try this. I'm going to do this. But before that, I had also, just been interested in queer history. And, in camp, they have those queer history lessons and they talk about the Mattachine Society. And knowing about all this pre-Stonewall queer history and the Mattachine, especially with their sort of layers of, covert meetings and all that, there's something exciting about it that I wanted to explore. And it was mostly happening in California, LA and San Francisco. San Francisco to me is a little more of a noir town. So that's why I went with that. And then I found this book and it was just sort of meant to be. And I was like, okay, this is happening. I'm writing this book.
That is so awesome. Why soap?
Oh, okay. Yeah, this is a fun story. And it's a weird sort of insight into my bizarre process. So I was coming up with this story and I was like, all right, what is, happening here? What is going to go on? And the first thing that came to me was like, I was thinking of Agatha Christie and I was thinking of Crooked House because I watched Crooked House too, the Gillian Anderson. Now that's an appropriately over the top Love it, love it. And I was like, well, that's sort of an Agatha Christie title. What house, if I'm going to do something like this, is a queer version of that? And I was like, Lavender House, for a lavender marriage. Somehow there's a lavender marriage in there that unites this house. So the title sort of what came first a little. And then in that moment, I was like, all right, but if they're going to call it Lavender House, they can't actually call it Lavender House because of the lavender marriage. They need to have another reason for it. So there must be lavender growing there. Why would lavender be growing there? What if they ran a soap empire? So it all sort of went that way. I briefly did consider having them do perfume, but there was something about perfume that feels a little more illicit. When I was conceiving this family and thinking about this, I was like, they have to appear straight in public. Soap is much more clean, excuse the pun, than perfume. Soap is a wholesome, squeaky clean family image. They would definitely have to make sure that people thought they were straight.
That's a great story. You're so right about that.
Very backwards. It's not normally how I do these things, but like it sort of spiraled backwards in an interesting way.
And it had to be something you could grow in that part of California too. And yet also, I think everybody thinks, ooh, wine. Do wine. They're right there. And you went and did something different, which was cool.
Oh yeah, no. My mother is a gardener, and in the original draft or something, she and I'm describing the garden, she circled every plant where she was like, nope, not in San Francisco, not in May.
Way to go, Mom, for getting the accuracy down.
Yeah, I'm lucky lavender grew there. Like, that's acceptable at least.
Now, this isn't your first mystery, but it is your first in 7 years. The previous one was Depth.
Mm-hmm.
What was it like coming back to that genre and digging in all over again to build the mystery aspect?
Well, I think that, I love Depth. Depth, was a book that I think came from the same place in my own sort of interests, in that it is a classic noir that just happens to take place at the end of the world. And it's worth noting, back then when I was writing, I did not feel like I could write queer protagonists. There's certainly a lot of homoerotic tension in Depth with Simone and her best friend, but I didn't feel like I could say, I felt like queer characters, and I wanted to put them in, had to be, a supporting cast. And part of that was the market at the time. And, you want to write something that's going to sell. You want to write something that people look at and they don't go, oh, this is too niche. And this was before queer fiction started booming outside of literary fiction, and at least my experience with it. And so part of my desire to explore noir and still feel as though I was exploring it in a way that felt authentic to me would be to have a female PI. And so because of that, I couldn't go backwards, and I went instead forwards. I tried to get back to a grittier New York by pushing it ahead to when the ice caps have melted and it's just sort of the tops of buildings and bridges and decommissioned boats. And that let me capture that old noir feeling, because it was a version of New York that felt like the New York of an old mystery novel, even if it is way in the future.
I want to talk about your process a little bit, because since there is this big cast, I'm really fascinated by it. And point of view all belongs to Andy. This is all Andy. It's all in his voice. But there's that, a lot of people living there. And as you kind of plot this out and make sure everybody gets their individual points, because everybody felt fully fleshed out, even how Andy was seeing them in the house. What was that like to juggle all those people and how they would click in with the plot and, things like that? So it wasn't like, well, why did I meet this person? We never really saw them again, but everybody kept showing up.
I don't know. Is that a great answer? It just sort of flowed kind of naturally to me. I mean, once I knew what the family was, which was this woman who had been married to a man and he died and she had his child. And then she strikes up an affair with a woman and, takes her on as her secretary. If their kid is queer, then all of a sudden I have a whole queer house. So like from there, it felt like a natural family tree to me, especially if you think of Margot not as their daughter-in-law, but as their daughter, which maybe to them she is. All of a sudden, it's like two moms, brother, sister, each of the brother, sisters, significant others. And so that felt like a pretty normal family flow chart to me. Alice is sort of an extra, fun and character, let's say, in that, she is the actual mother of Margot. But once all of them were in place, and the way they interacted just came very naturally to me. There was something about understanding, what that relationship would look like, this marriage, these friendships, this house, how they would all interact, that felt just like writing a family. And I think writing a family can feel very natural once you understand the characters. And I think I understood them pretty early on. They all appeared pretty fully formed in my mind.
I love it when
Henry
that
was
happens.
the one. Henry was the one I had the most trouble with, I will say. I didn't get him until he did his Betty Davis impersonation. And
That's
then
hilarious that was what gave it to you.
I was like, now I get this guy. I get him now. And he has that moment where he's like, and I can't do it at parties, even as a trick. Oh, like all of a sudden he like was fully formed to me, and I can go back and fill him in more.
And for those of you who haven't read the book yet, when you get to that point, you'll know exactly what we're talking about. I love how many things there are in the book that seem to resonate so much now. Like, I was marking stuff in my Kindle, like, oh, that's really good. That's really good. And a couple of them I put in the review, but there's one I want to talk about here a little bit, because it's one of those that just hits really hard and seems to hit home now. And that's late in the book. The case is wrapped up, and Andy thinks this particular thing to himself. Some of us don't get any peace, not really, but that's not the same as happiness. Peace comes to you if you're lucky. Happy you grab and make with your own two hands. And I feel like that resonates for queer people even today, with the environment that we live in. There's probably no good answer for this, but how did you end up putting so many of those interesting nuggets into this book? Is it because of where we are right now? Would you have written the same 3-4 years ago?
Ooh, that's a good question. I genuinely don't know. I mean, obviously with camp and with Jack of Hearts, I have been experiencing a lot of things, perhaps more so than other queer people, or less. I'm not obviously way less than the teenagers that these things are happening to, but I'm informed of, that's what I mean. I'm informed of things that are happening more than I would like to be. My book is being banned here, your book is being banned there. I get emails from people all the time asking me to somehow fix it, like I have that power. And so I am watching this happen as, and I'd written the book sort of before all this started, I think, before the banning got really intense. And so it resonated for me more afterwards. And I'm trying to think of the timeline. I might have been editing at that point, and it might have given me some insight into lines like that. But certainly it's something that has been happening, and which I don't know if it inspired me consciously. Certainly it didn't inspire me consciously, but I don't know if it created some of those lines. I don't know if I would have been able to write it if, it weren't happening the way it is now. But it wasn't conscious, if that's what you're asking. It wasn't a sort of, oh yeah, I'm going to draw a comparison between what's going on with these book bans today and, how it was for queer people in the 50s. Because I think it's funny, I see reviews online, people post them on Instagram, Goodreads, from straight people, reviews that say about Lavender House, things were so much more difficult for queer people then than they are now it's so much more liberal. And I'm like, it isn't. And I understand why straight people who are probably out of the loop and not paying much attention to queer politics don't know that. They see a queer character on a lot of TV shows and they're like, oh, isn't it nice representation, love is love. But the fights that are happening are not usually happening in the light in the way that the queer community I think thinks they are. For us, it's like every 5 minutes, constantly Twitter, Instagram, the news, etc. But you got to remember, straight people aren't seeing that. They're not paying attention, so they don't see it. And so when they read the book and they see that, and they think it's so different, and you and me think it's so much the same, to me it comes down to sort of, I wish I knew how to bridge that gap. I wish I knew how to make people see what is happening, you know, here, that is still happening today. And I don't know how to do that. And that's not even the answer to your question anymore. I'm just sort of musing, but yeah, it didn't, what's happening today didn't directly inspire this book in any way because it was mostly written, but it might have inspired the way the language works in the edits, those lines that you're talking about. Yes.
Mm-hmm. I say it resonates today, and obviously we're not living in the way that the 50s is, but you could see a trajectory where that might be where we're headed.
Mm-hmm. Which, I mean, I think I would say that teenagers today are living like this. I would say queer teens are having this. You know, they can't talk about it. And teachers, to an extent, you know, Florida in the, what was it, the 60s, 70s, they had that whole like institution specifically for finding queer teachers and firing them. And that feels very much like what's happening again in Florida right now. So it does feel like in many ways things are happening much more so to teenagers, much more so to trans people than they are to us. And so it's difficult to reconcile. Like on some level, things have not changed. And on another level, things have changed massively. Mm-hmm. And I think that it's that one level where things haven't changed, where, you know, there's this idea of we're still in these little cages where we make our families and where we can truly be ourselves. And then we have the outside world where we can say we're gay, but we still have to behave a particular way. We have to be a particular type of gay. And that is what this is, even if it's the difference being particular type of gay versus straight. Pretend you're straight, pretend you're masked, pretend you're straight acting, whatever. It's the same, even if it's changed.
It's interesting you mentioned the queer kids because it wasn't that long ago. It was back in May that you wrote an article for LitHub called "The Purpose of Book Bans is to Make Queer Kids Scared." And it was also a very personal article for you because of some of the things that have been said about you with these book bans. How did you come to write this article? And just to let folks know too, we'll link it in the show notes so you can go read this if you haven't happened to catch it already, so you can get the full article there too.
I mean, obviously there are many challenges and bans happening with Jack of Hearts, my sex ed thriller, my young adult sex ed thriller. And so it was there and people were aware of it and people were asking me to write about it. And I didn't really want to. I don't think I should be the face of book banning. I don't think that it's my role because A, I'm white and so many of these books are being banned because they're about people who aren't white. But also because, you know, I'm a chubby bearded guy. I'm a picture they would throw up of like, do you want this pervert near your children? And so I didn't want to do that. And like, you know, people asked me to talk on CNN and stuff, and I declined all that. I didn't have any interest in being that guy. But I visited my in-laws in Florida, and they just moved there, and they're in a area where one of these groups started up, the exact county, one of the groups that was trying to ban my book. And the whole time I'm down there, what I'm thinking is, oh God, did these people know? Did these people know what I look like? You know, is my mask protecting me? What if they knew I was here? And then it occurred to me, like, you know, that must be what it's like to be a queer kid in that county all the time. And, you know, I only had to do it for a week and I could easily hide in my in-laws' place. And, you know, it was COVID. We weren't going out much. It was fine. But imagine living that all the time. Imagine just like getting rolled over with that anxiety and that fear, which is, again, that's what links back to this. and how the teenagers and teachers now must feel having to hide themselves like that all the time, afraid of if people know, afraid what they do if they know. Because I was afraid of violence. There are people going to drag time story hour with guns. I don't know the difference between someone who genuinely is like, oh gosh, isn't this a little too much sexual information for a 15-year-old, versus someone who's like, you writing about gay teenagers? I'm gonna kill you, you pedo. Like, it takes so much effort for us to find out what that difference is, that it is safer for us to just be like, nope, 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 nope. These people, are all dangerous. And so that mentality as a teenager all the time, that was what I started thinking about. And that's why I wrote the article, I think. The thing when people wanted to interview me about book banning in particular, and I did a few, written interviews, and the thing I always said to them was, I will talk to you if you talk to a queer teenager, or at least promise me you will after. You got to promise me you'll talk to a queer teenager, because that's who these books are affecting. And that's who these arguments are affecting too. Imagine being in a town where, I watched the video of a priest get up and say that I'm a pedophile, whatever. But imagine being a teenager in a town, being a closeted teenager, and watching a priest get up and say, these books about queer people are pedophiles. Imagine a bunch of people agreeing with him. Imagine other people disagreeing. Imagine all this fighting over you that you can't even, and you don't get a voice in it. And that's why, that's why I think it's most important to talk to the teens. And I was just so thrilled when those teens did a walkout. I think it happened like right after I got back from Florida. That was amazing. And there are walkouts in Texas too. And I think what I like to say is the teenagers are going to save us, and it's a shame that they have to. But yeah, that's what I was thinking of. I was thinking of the teenagers.
I appreciate you talking to us about that, because it's certainly not the topic we were here to talk about, but I think it's also an important topic as well.
I don't
Spinning it back to Lavender House, what's a favorite scene in Lavender House for you? And preferably one that maybe you can give without giving too many spoilers to the awesome plot.
Cliff drunkenly lip syncing in his underwear. There was some difficulty with that. I had picked a song and then I couldn't use the lyrics. And so I had to find a song I could use the lyrics for. And so that became complicated. The song changed several times, but the sort of like Cliff in his underwear and a loose robe, sort of drunk and seducing the detective. It's this femme fatale moment, but it's also like it was so much fun to write. And I think I knew that was a scene that I was going to write for Cliff when I invented Cliff. And so that's sort of where his character came from. This drunken chorus boy in his underwear, still lip syncing and seducing a detective.
I don't think people realize how hard it is to put any kind of lyrics in a book.
Oh, yeah.
Share with us, because, we won't do lyrics here, but what were some of the early songs that you had him lip syncing to?
I originally wanted him to lip sync to, I just wrote a whole article about the songs. So there were two before that I like. There was one that I think was too on the nose, and then I got to Cold Cold Heart, and that was what I really wanted to use, but I couldn't use that at all, because that was like that was actually from the 40s, and I think I can only use songs from like 36 or earlier. So I had to like do a big search. I recruited some friends. My friend Molly, I think, found the song in the end, and she was like, "This is the vibe you want."
There could be a whole Spotify playlist of the songs you could not use.
Yeah, well, I mean, there is a Spotify playlist of all the music mentioned in the book, and it does include the songs I could not use that I wanted to. So it is perfect. Up there. Yeah.
Deleted scenes.
Deleted music, at least.
We will link to the Spotify playlist for sure, so that people can check that out. We got to talk about the cover, too. You've held it up a couple times. The cover is absolutely gorgeous. It both reminds me of like wallpaper, a little bit vintage wallpaper, but also with that central kind of image in the sort of face like of old timey brooches, like the some of the women just wear right at the center of the neck. How did this gorgeous cover come to be?
I am giving all credit where it's due to the cover designer, Katie Klimowitz, and the cover artist, Colin Verdi. It's interesting. This is the first time I was like really involved in cover design. And it's because I sort of like sent an essay or I usually write a little memo up of like my thoughts and like cover stuff. And I sent one in and Katie read it and was like, I want to talk to this guy. Guess it came off as the right kind of out there. So she and I sat down. She had this whole presentation set up. She wanted to use this artist, and she had lots of clips from him. And like she was gung ho, and there was some concern that maybe his stuff was a little too horror-y. But the wallpaper stuff he had done, which was sort of horror-y, it's like beautiful wallpaper of peacocks, and then you look at their tails, and it's actual eyeballs. He's very talented. He's really good at this subtle stuff. And so I was like, all right, yeah, let's do that. She wanted to just send him the book and let him come up with ideas. So that's what we did. And he read the whole book. And even though they had only asked him for like 3 pitches, he came back with 6 or something. And they were all stunning. They were all genuinely like, I still have them. I still look at them. They're so beautiful. And these were just rough sketches. And like, we eliminated some. This is too graphic novel. This is too young. This is too similar to that other cover. And we came down to this one. And my editor will enjoy this or maybe not enjoy the story. So when we were talking about things that could be on the wallpaper, because there are these bunnies, except for this one dead one, we were talking about, what would be on the wallpaper to give it a little more oomph? And I was like, what about rabbits and one's dead? She was like, I don't think a dead rabbit is going to sell a book, Lev. All I think about is my dog digging up like bowls from the lawn. That was the one thing we sort of like outvoted her on, was the dead animal on the cover thing. It came out so gorgeous. It's Katie and Colin, and I don't know if you've seen the full thing, but they gave me end papers.
Oh, that's gorgeous. This is my first look at that because I haven't actually gotten to hold the book yet. Yeah. Nice.
Yeah. And this is Katie. There are secret rabbits on the book, and this will be a podcast. So I'm going to show people the secret rabbits, but I'm not going to. So if you're watching, you'll see them. So, close your eyes now. But I'm not going to say where they are. But. And
it's kind of like Mickey's ears at Disneyland.
Yeah. So there are these hidden rabbits, which is like speaks to the theme of the book so perfectly. Yeah, no, it's just gorgeous. I loved his work so much. I hired him to do those postcards that I've been giving away as pre-order bonuses. I think he is just so talented, and I'm excited to see what they come up with for the second one. And Katie is she's brilliant. She's such an excellent cover designer, and choosing him was so smart, and what she's done with his work is so smart.
Yeah, it's
cannot praise them high enough. Like I could go on for hours about how great they are.
What's the future hold for Andy? You leave a door open at the end of the book.
That door is walked through.
Excellent.
There is a sequel coming next fall. It's called The Bell in the Fog, and it'll be fall 23. I'm in edits on it now. And, it does give away a little to sort of talk about the setup, but what is proposed at the end of the book is what he does. But it is a little more difficult for him to set up. I'll just say he sets up as a PI. I think that's a general, not too spoilery statement. It's more difficult for him to be a PI than he expected because people don't trust him because of his background. And then a stranger from his past walks into his office and has a case for him. And that's all I'm going to say for now.
This isn't a romance in Lavender House.
No.
You could give me a straight up yes or no on this one.
Sure.
Does Andy get to find some love? Because I know who I want him to be with. But can he find some love maybe in book 2? Andy
kisses someone in book 1, and that someone reappears in book 2. And is a more central role.
Excellent. That was even more than I expected to get. We've got a question from one of our patrons, and Rebecca asks, you're a new author for her.
Mm-hmm.
Is there a book you'd recommend that Rebecca starts with which I think is an interesting question because you write across so many kind of
Yeah.
different subgenres. You've got YA books, you've got adult themed books, you've got mysteries and love stories. And
Yeah, and middle
what's the
grade
quintessential Liv
science
book?
fiction. Well, I will say this. Lavender House is the book my writing group who's been with me for like 10 years, let's say. And this is the book that they said I was meant to write. So if you want like a sort of book of the heart, book of Lev's soul, whatever, it's probably going to be this one. But yes, I write everything because I read everything. So I have teen rom-coms, teen sex ed thrillers. Next year, I got a teen adventure novel coming out in the style of Indiana Jones. And yeah, and a teen contemporary retelling of Jane Austen's Emma. I have 3 books out next year. It's going to be busy. And then I also have a steampunk romance and a dystopian noir. And then I have middle grades that are, one is very literary about Alzheimer's and video games, and the other is more of a storybook fable. So I love all these genres, so I just add to them. Why I've never understood the sort of, stay in one lane sort of thing. I'm bad at that. But I would say you should just read the descriptions of the book and read the one that sounds like the thing you would like the most, because that's the joy of writing everything is hopefully that means there is a book for you. Maybe not every book. I don't need to write books that appeal to literally everyone. And if you pick up depth and you're like, oh gosh, I don't want to read a dystopian noir, that's not for me, don't read it. I mean, buy it if you can. I would appreciate that, but don't read it. It's fine.
You should pick up Lavender House, Rebecca, which I think you said in your post that you had already pre-ordered it based on what I said about it. But it is a great place to start.
I will say Lavender House is great. And if you like the sort of queer family environment, the natural progression would probably be camp from there. Very different tone, but very similar emotional setting, let's say.
And what have you been reading lately that our listeners should, in fact, check out?
Well, I'm such a slow reader. My husband can get through like a book a week, and I'm just like, it takes me, months to get through a single book. And part of that is when I'm like deep in writing, I try not to read other fiction because it like gets in my head too much sometimes, and it ruins the voice. So it's more of a I read fiction while I'm editing thing. And with 3 books out next year, but as I mentioned earlier, the David Brandstetter mystery, starting with Fade Out by Joseph Hansen, excellent, just excellent. I'm only a few books in, but there's like 14 of them. And the writing is so good. It's not just like, oh, these are books from the 70s with a queer protagonist, how exciting. Like the writing is beautiful, lines that linger with you that aren't even like poignant, they're just beautiful. So I highly recommend those. That's what I've been reading mostly. I reread Emma for my YA retelling, and I've been reading a lot of nonfiction as I do research for the sequel to this and for other stuff. So it's been a lot of nonfiction. But if you're interested in queer history, Wide Open Town, as I said earlier, very good. Eric Cervini's Deviant's War, very good. Hugh Ryan has 2 books, both excellent. When Brooklyn Was Queer and The Women's House of Detention. Oh, I'm reading right now a book called The Lavender Scare, which is very comprehensive. It's more Washington, D.C. focused than I thought it would be going in, but it's well done. And I don't have it in front of me, so I don't remember the author's name. But it's been out for decades as well, I think, or maybe 5 years. I have no idea what time is anymore.
Time is like, who knows anymore?
Yeah, but yeah, those are some great nonfiction. And yes, this Indecent Advances, James Pulchin. This I read a while ago, but if you're looking for nonfiction about the way queerness is criminalized in the public eye, this is fascinating. He like goes through all these court cases that have, and like the way sort of like people would say I'm not queer, it was the other guy who was like, and like how that worked. Almost, it's fascinating.
What a great list of books. Some good mysteries to read, some good queer history to read.
Mm-hmm.
You've done damage to my TBR. So we've talked a little bit about your future. There's a sequel to Lavender House. There's some YA teen adventure. There's the retelling of Emma. Anything else lurking out there that we should be keeping an eye out for, or, looking even more into the future, into 2024?
2024, there'll be a sequel to the sort of queer archaeologist adventure books. That's YA, and it's called Lion's Legacy. And so Lion's Legacy, it follows a teen archaeologist whose father is a famous reality star archaeologist who wears a fedora and finds ancient artifacts which often have paranormal qualities to them, although he hides that from the public on his reality show. And they had a huge fight a few years ago when Tennessee 10 realized at age like 13, 14 that these treasures they were finding were not actually going back to the people who they originally belonged to. And so he and his father haven't really spoken since then. And his father's continued the show without him. But one day his father shows up. Tennessee has just had a terrible breakup. And his father's like, I want you to come back. We're going to be looking for the wedding rings of the Sacred Band of Thebes, which was an army in ancient Greece of 150 gay couples. And Tennessee is like, okay, but what are you going to do with them? And his dad's like, you know what? I want you back, so you get to decide. And so Tennessee, even though he's still furious with his father, goes with him, and they, have to explore ancient temples and bypass traps and find rings, which might be magic, and maybe meet a cute boy on the way. That is, it's a classic sort of archaeology adventure. It's young adult, and it's a lot of sort of the question of, why is queer history always erased? What queer history do we have that we don't know about? How do we preserve it? And who does it belong to? And those are sort of the questions I was playing with, while also getting to, describe exciting temples and adventures and stuff like that. And that'll be out spring next year, I think May. And then next fall, we have the Belle in the Fog, the Lavender House sequel. And then a little after that, sort of holiday season, fall, whatever, we have Emmett, a contemporary queer YA retelling of Jane Austen's Emma, in which Emmett Woodhouse, who definitely does not want a relationship because your brain's not done developing until you're 25, is determined to find a boyfriend for his friend with benefits who is suddenly catching feelings, if only to get him away from him.
It's going to be so much fun. I can't wait for next year. 3 books from you.
3 books. I'm going to be busy.
Yes, if you're going to be editing for like the rest of this year, probably, and into next.
Yeah, no, they're all almost done. So like into next year, I'm going to be sort of like, what's happening now? But the Lion's Legacy will have a sequel in 2024.
Nice. What's the best way for folks to keep up with you online, just to keep up when all these books are starting to roll out and anything new that comes up?
I'm on social media as Lev AC Rosen, Levac Rosen. That's Instagram and Twitter. I barely use Facebook because it got wonky at one point, but on Facebook, I'm just Lev Rosen. And I'm on TikTok as Lev AC Rosen too, but I am afraid of that place. I've done 3 TikToks. Instagram is the best. I am happiest on Instagram. I will announce things on Twitter, but I try not to engage as much there just because once you're on Twitter, I get depressed. Instagram
totally
has more photos of cute animals and so keeps me less depressed. So Instagram is my favorite place to be, and you can reach out to me there. And on my website, levacrosen.com, I respond to any emails I get. Just they often go into spam because of the email system. So if you write me, do check your spam.
Lev, thank you so much for coming to talk about Lavender House. Wish you so much success with this book, and eager to see what's coming in 2023.
Thank you so much. And it is always a joy to come on your podcast. What you do is not just fun, and you do it in a fun way, but it's genuinely important to the community. So thank you.